Live today from the virtual Daytona International Speedway, we say good afternoon, race fans, and welcome to the 2021 IMSA iRacing Pro Series Preseason Invitational. And happy to have you with us on the iRacing Esports Network, or alongside myself, Evan Pasoko. Happy to be joined by James Pike and Justin Prince on the call today. And guys, 2020 brought us a lot, but what it did bring us, James, was the IMSA iRacing Pro Series. And happy to be back for the 2021 calendar, beginning here tonight. Where else but at Daytona?
You flip the calendar to 2021 and immediately your mind starts going to Daytona. If you love sports car racing, this, of course, the home of the 24 Hours of Daytona, which aren't that far off, only a few weeks away, both here in iRacing and in the real world as well. So a great place to start off our Pro Series campaign for 2021.
Exactly to that point, Justin, that Rolex 24 at Daytona is only 2 weeks away, so maybe today could be seen as a bit of a warm-up for those drivers as they get some sim time ahead of that race. But also, I mean, they're no longer kind of sim racing to rookies, right? A lot of these guys got their toes wet with the 2020 IMSA iRacing Pro Series, so we should be in store for a great race today.
Many of the drivers you expect to see up towards the front are here today. Drivers like Richard Westbrook, Robert Foley, Albert Kirk, many others. It's going to be a competitive field. It's going to be interesting, though, how some of the newcomers to the Pro Series do, as well as how these drivers adapt to this crucial time.
Well, let's take a look at this Daytona International Speedway, the virtual form this afternoon anyways, as we get set to go racing today. This track made history back in the day as the first multi-use facility inside of its world-renowned 2.5-mile super speedway is its equally as famous 3.56-mile road course. 12 corners to get around this track, James, and it's unlike anything else on the IMSA calendar.
Most IMSA races are held at purpose-built road courses. This is a purpose-built roval, so you've got some NASCAR oval parts that you deal with, and you can just blitz down some of these straightaways and corners. 31 degrees of banking in the turns to help you, but you get down to the infield, it's incredibly flat, it's technical. You have to be very, very careful getting back on the throttle to get the most out of your laps down in that portion of the course.
And in the real world, Justin, these guys are used to racing multi-class events. We are qualifying everybody in the field here tonight behind the wheel of identical Dallara P217 LMP2s with fixed setup. So in the sim, everybody working with equal equipment. The difference between being fast and not going to come solely on the driver's hands today.
Now, some of the drivers mentioned that there are varying levels of preparation they put in today. The drivers who are the most comfortable with the car and able to execute the best throughout the corners are the ones who are going to be able to go well today. Keep in mind, strategy is also going to be critical, and when these drivers come into pit and how they manage their fuel, all of that information is going to be so vital for everyone across the field today.
Taking a look at, that was Felipe Albuquerque there. Some of the other drivers with Sebastian Priaulx. This is a 10-minute, 2-lap qualifying session. It is a closed track, so all of these drivers are qualifying simultaneously. But the beauty of sim racing is we can have them all run on their own at the same time. So it's going to be uninterrupted laps as all these drivers try to get out there and put their best foot forwards. And in a sprint race, James, where we're looking at only an hour-long feature, of course, far cry from what we'll see in 2 weeks' time with the real-life Rolex 24, and even here on the sim, by the way, with the virtual 24 hours of Daytona. I think qualifying may be a little bit more important this week than it is in 2 weeks.
I think it'll certainly help, especially because this is the first time that the Dallara P217 is available to everyone in iRacing. It only arrived on the service in September, so it's the first chance that these drivers will be able to use this car in the 24 Hours of Daytona. And to that end, any extra practice that you get, I think, is going to be helpful with a new car like this.
Yes, seat time is seat time, to say the very least. Simulator time so valuable, and many of the drivers in the field today have embraced simulator racing, especially in iRacing, whether it's racing with various other technical alliances or starting their own. It's going to be critical for some of these drivers to be able to hit their marks today, though. That's the key thing, especially the infield, if they want to get track position, with it being where at a track like this, if you start at the back, it can be very difficult to get to the front.
And you can see a bit of a lockup of the brakes there for the 15 Aprio down into turn number 1. That basically first whole long trip around was just a warm-up lap. So drivers are now starting to put times in on the board and qualify for this field. 23 different IMSA pros registered for this one. There's the times registered left-hand side of your screen. Scott Andrews currently at the top of the board with his first lap for the RAG Esports entry. And of course, you talk about that infield section, James, where it's also flat. Here's Robbie Foley going through the right-hander in turn number 5, but then go for left-hander down here in 6th and back up on what's known as 1 and 2 on the NASCAR oval. Here it's turn 7.
Turn 7 or NASCAR 1 and 2, you'll hear both over the course of the broadcast, but just like it is in real life, but you get a sense of the speed here. And it might not necessarily be so obvious today just because we don't have any DT cars on track, but these things are flying when they come down into the bus stop, and you really have to be careful when you get on the brakes. Just make sure you don't lock them up and spin yourself out like we've seen so many times in the real and the virtual world.
You can see it with the visor cam here too, with some of the motions and how quickly you have to go through the gears. 198 miles an hour into the bus stop. And if you mess up the bus stop, Evan, you are going to lose a significant amount of time, especially the angle of how you take that run today, whether in qualifying or in the race, because you take it right, you can likely drop behind somebody or try and save fuel right here or make a pass, whether it be on the inside or the outside. You mess that up, it puts you up for grabs for being passed.
It looks like Foley improves. He will stay number 4 on the board. That was his second timed lap, so that's it. We're getting our zebra spotting out of the way early with that look at the Turner Motorsports entry. And down with about 4 minutes and change left in qualifying. Most of the drivers, if they rolled off of the pit lane immediately, will have had time to get down 2 timed laps to this point. But I just saw when we were watching the last car down, and this time into the bus stop, which counts as 4 turns in its own right, it's going to be 8, 9, 10, and 11. I saw 198 miles an hour. As we head to that NASCAR banking in 3 and 4, turn 12, check out the banking and what it does to these prototypes.
Talked about it a little bit ago, how much the banking can help you get around some of these corners, and you see it's almost like halfway climbing a building with some of the elevation that they get there. And then very flat when you come back towards the tri-oval. A little bit of help as you cross the start-finish line, but it's part of what allows these prototypes to get in excess of 185 miles an hour by the time they get back here towards turn 1.
Yeah, and this similar type of situation, especially with a hot racetrack for drivers such as this one, where drivers have to be able to try and use a bit of a build-up to coming back onto the banking, even in NASCAR 1 and 2. Some of them have varying different ways to do it. Tom Lone specifically, we've seen use a little bit of a higher arc, trying to build up momentum. Currently, the second laps have been the quicker laps by up to 5 seconds from some of our competitors.
Just trying to ease into this, the best times in practice have not gotten to the best times in practice. So you can see the 81 machine of height stand at the top of the board. He was good enough for 4th best in practice earlier. So when you kind of go out there and have only 1 or 2 shots of putting down a Q lap and a lapped qualifying session with only 2 attempts, you are going to get some drivers who weren't able to match what they did in practice, which means we should be in store for a competitive feature. Long had already done his 2 timed laps. He was just going out there to get a little bit more practice, so he'll bring that car now back down and into the garage, and we'll continue to watch some of the qualifying efforts, this time on board with the 133 machine. That's going to be Gabby Chavez. A bit of work to do currently at the very bottom of the board in qualifying. Of course, Gabby, the defending IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge Touring Car champion. So we talk about the array of experience in the real world for these drivers, and Gabby Chavez has been behind the wheel of many race cars.
Chavez has got sports car experience. He's got open wheel experience. Might be a little bit slow at this point, but I have a feeling it won't take long for him to get up to speed. We definitely are going to see that race car play some factor in this event, I think, a little bit later on.
I think you can say the same thing for Dakota Dickerson when it came to last year's Pro Series races on iRacing. He was very quick, and one of the drivers who was entertaining to watch for some of the battles in the mid-pack, especially when Roy went back and forth, found his way as one of the biggest movers constantly. Someone that I think is going to be someone as an impact driver on this racetrack today. It's going to be intriguing, James, how Dickerson does from San Diego, California.
I love this onboard here. You see just how bumpy those curves can be. And that's one thing that I noticed in particular driving this LMP2 myself. The springs in the rear are incredibly stiff, which they need to be in order to go fast. But you really notice it when you go over the bumps and in the infield in particular where it's very flat. And then you come back onto the banking here. It's very smooth, very easy. Not much difference from the scan here that got captured in 2011. But you understand why they can go incredibly quick down into the infield when you see it here.
It's not a huge field tonight, of course, 23 drivers, and we talked about the multi-class racing that these guys are used to, but because it is a sprint race, you may have a little bit less of that patience that you'll see somebody show early in a 12 or a 24-hour race. You can see the 333 get to go back out on track. All the laps have already been logged, I believe, so this just trying to get some extra practice in, right? Any little bit that you can, but I think it is going to prove that this start will be awfully critical, especially that first dive down into turn number one.
Turn number one, always tricky to enter when you've got a field. Doesn't matter whether or not it's prototypes, it's GT cars. It's just going to be everybody keeping their heads on a swivel and make sure that you mind your P's and Q's. Don't be afraid to give up a little bit to make sure that you get through turn one and snake off into the S's before you hit the first of two horseshoes in the infield, the International horseshoe.
Yeah, and this is why I think, too, why drivers such as him are trying to get some extra experience in for this racetrack. Make sure they have everything all dialed in, all set to go on this circuit. One start in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship last year. Had a solid run with the podium. We'll see how he does.
And that's it for the qualifying session. We're ready to go racing in Daytona Beach, Florida. Let's take a look at your IMSA iRacing Pro Series starting grid. And besting them all is that 81 of Richard Heitstand with a 133.584 will bring us to the green flag this evening alongside Scott Andrews on row one.
Kenton Cook, Robbie Foley, 2 days with plenty of IMSA experience make up the second row on the grid, Justin.
Tommy Miller, Danny Morad, going to be very quick in row three. Both of them, a lot of sim experience throughout 2020.
You'll find Richard Westbrook and Charlie Eastwood making up spots 7 and 8. That's row 4.
Row 5 belongs to John Edwards in the 88 and Philippe Albuquerque in the 10 car.
Harry Gottsacker, we talked about it a little bit. One of the quickest drivers in practice today, Riley Dickinson. We'll start alongside him in row 6.
For drivers, the likes of Dakota Dickerson, Benjamin Waddle, you've also got James French, Tyler Cook, Mason Filippi, and everybody else through your 23-car starting grid. Chavez unable to improve and will be at the back of the grid there with some sort of an issue in qualifying with 141. Aside from that, the rest of the field guys separated by basically just 1 second. That's pretty tight sim racing-wise for a 3.56 mile road course. Rolling start as always here at the World Center of Racing. Such a fun and excited way to get this 2021 IMSA iRacing Pro Series kicked off. You can take a look at your in-sim weather conditions, guys. Before we roll, I want to get some predictions for this one. James, I'm going to you first.
Put me on the spot right off the bat. Yep. Hard. I like the thought of Philippe Albuquerque doing something here. With that 10 car, the Wayne Taylor Racing Machine, they know how to make a prototype go fast at Daytona. Multiple 24 hours of Daytona victories under their belt. And he's got a few individual victories here on his own. So I'll keep an eye on that 10 car over the course of the race.
Going to be hard to pick between 3 drivers, Kenton Cook, Robbie Foley, Tommy Miller. Drivers with a lot of sim racing experience, as talked about. Miller with his own sim racing organization, Foley working with the sim racing organization for this event. Kenton Cook also working with several organizations throughout the year. All 3 of those drivers are going to be quick. Keep an eye on those drivers, 3rd through 5th.
Again, last year, we saw these drivers in the GTLM class. Today, racing with the LMP2s from the high banks of the Daytona International Speedway without last year's series champion, Brunner Spangler, runner-up, Nicky Katzberg. So it could open up the door for some of these other drivers to find themselves into virtual IMSA victory lane. As we look off of the back of the iRacing.com official pace car going to dive down to pit road this time through. We're happy that you're with us on the iRacing Esports Network for the kickoff of this 2021 IMSA iRacing Pro Series. It's the preseason invitational. Pace car down, field in the hands of Richard Heistand. They're going to check up at the back already as we say, let's go sim racing at Daytona. Well, saw a bit of contact that first time through the infield section. I saw Felipe Albuquerque around in the grass at a turn number 3 of the International Horseshoe. Also, Robbie Foley took a bit of a shot from behind, I think maybe from Tommy Milner, but they kept those cars on track and no change first and second. Heistand and Andrews, first and second off of turn 12.
And you're already seeing the effects of the draft on lap 1. Look at how quickly the 74 closed up right to that rear wing of the 81. And no question here, he's just going to dive down into turn 1 to make that pass easy on lap 2.
And this is going to be interesting how things play out here after some of the troubles for a couple drivers. Robbie Foley, I believe, may have a bit of damage here. That's going to really impact him straight line speed-wise to catch up to these guys and keep up with the pack of cars. That's going to cause a hornet's nest to start to build up right behind him already. You cannot get significant damage like that. It can cost you at a track like this where you need straight line speed to be able to contend.
You just can't get away with it when you're on the banking of the super speedway, and he was kind of in a front to back to front bit of contact in that International Horseshoe that I mentioned, and he said over the radio, hey, I'm hurt. So he's fine in this part of the racetrack through the infield portion, but this whole group of cars behind him are really going to try to team up on him right here when they get back up and onto the banking. Now, there is one quick repair available to these drivers. It's a racer's best friend, because it's what you would want in the real world. Basically, instead of sitting in the pit box and having the virtual crew actually work to repair the damage, you get a brand new race car. They only have one of those. We expect that to be used at the one and only pit stop we're expecting in this one. Let's take a second look at the replay, looking towards the 10. That's Felipe Albuquerque, who I saw on the grass.
It was Albuquerque, and we'll see on the replays they come down into the Horseshoe. It's the 53 machine that gets into Albuquerque. That's Riley Dickinson, who makes contact with the 10 car and sends him around. A few others go around behind him as well. But Justin, that I think is just a classic case of that first lap stack up. We've seen it so many times in real life, and it happens in the sim as well.
We were talking about this before the race. One of the main attrition points was right in that section in the Horseshoes, especially in that particular one where you have so many drivers trying to make lunges on the first couple laps of the race, looking to try and get to the inside of several others. If you don't get fully clear by the apex, it leads to those types of scenarios. But as we mentioned, the damage on Foley's car trying to push a little bit, but still can't make a pass stick on Coke right now. They've already lost 2 seconds in the top 2.
Very good so far for Andrews at Heistand, who have been untouchable. Their advantage is already about 2.5 seconds ahead of this group third on the back. As you mentioned, Coke able to make the move on Foley, and Foley really just trying to hang on onto these parts of the track, right, where you have those high speeds, close to 200 miles an hour. He's not off by a lot, but you can already see how much that Coke has pulled in front of him, and it may force Foley to decide to take a pit stop. Justin, you talked about 40 minutes time-wise at a tank of fuel. Maybe instead of running 40 to the end, he goes shorter if he wants to get quick repaired, or at least just damage fixed on that car sooner rather than later. On board with the 128 machine, that's Charlie Eastwood trying to chase down Richard Westbrook just up the road. It's a great pack of cars here, 5th through 9th, separated by just 1 second.
And I feel like at this stage in the race, it's just about sort of getting everything up to temperature and beginning to learn your marks, get up to speed, up to pace. It's not necessarily about pressing the issue and trying to overtake someone if you can, although Foley up there just ahead gets a spot. But you just want to make sure you get settled into a groove and start clicking off lap times so that you don't put yourself in trouble and don't end up burning that fast repair that you talked about, Evan, a little bit early, Justin.
And keep in mind as well that if you fight too early, it makes it difficult to reel in the next groups because you lose the draft of the cars in front, and in turn you get yourself almost into a running formation. You almost, as a competitor, need to be able to maintain patience, even in a shorter format such as this, to be able to remind yourself, if I make the moves at the wrong time, I'm going to cost myself about a second if I make it at the wrong part of the racetrack. You have to weigh down patience and try and make sure you pick your spots if you want to try and leapfrog somebody.
Two drivers already out of this race. The 25 of Mikkel Miller got into the back straightaway wall on the opening lap coming out of the bus stop. That was a single car spin that heavily damaged that car and ended his afternoon. And then Tom Long as well, early to the garage in this one. Side by side, up and on the high banks to the outside of the racetrack. And the pass, maybe, it's going to be a drag race down and into the bus stop. And that game of chicken is going to be won, at least for the moment. So give that spot. The 99 machine going to drop back one for Benjamin Waddle, and Tommy Wilner gets the position for the time being. So these cars are going to spread out, right? In just an hour sprint race doesn't mean they're going to be breathing down each other's necks for the entirety of it, James. You talked about early in this one, drivers just trying to get everything up to temp, trying to get into a little bit of a rhythm. You don't want to take too long to do so. Let's watch the race leaders once more. Their advantage over the rest of the field only continuing to grow. First and second, now 3 seconds ahead of that melee third on back.
Maybe so, but you see a little bit of action on your screen. I noticed last time by, Richard Heiston in the 81 car, 0.6 of a second faster than your leader Scott Andrews in that 74 prototype. So we may have a battle for the race lead before too long, Justin.
Yes, and you just seen right there, that was where that battle started to pick up for the 99 moments ago for Lotto. He had made a major mistake going into the West Horseshoe, where it's so easy to lock up the brakes, just have the car wheel hop and lose your back end and just spin off into the grass with this car. And if you go in the marbles, especially overrun too fast in this car, you're just going to completely lose grip, and that was the case. That set up that position battle we seen moments ago.
So it goes to show that, well, yes, we talk about in a small or short race, I rather should say, like this, where the other drivers may be a concern and you want to stay out of trouble. Also, with some of the incidents we've seen to this point, making sure you keep your own car underneath you and on your own, seemingly just as important. So you can actually see Andrews pulling just a little bit ahead of Highstand in the number 2 position. The driver for the GazX Racing team in second. Pretty comfortably over third in company. This is to the point that I was trying to make where, you do want to take it a little bit easy off of the start, but if you let the leaders get, 5-6 seconds ahead, going to be awfully difficult to reel them in. So those drivers third on back doing what they can to keep it steady at about 3 seconds and change right now. But I mean, so far, picture perfect for these guys, right? And no shock, James, that these are the fast drivers. Andrews was second in practice and decided to, start this race in the number 2 spot, but has since gone to the race lead ahead of Highstand. She's been very consistent tonight, 4th best in practice, and your pole sitter. No big shock that these guys are first and second. The real thing is, for some of the drivers who may not have as much in-sim time, is going to be, when you can't literally feel the race car underneath you, is just making sure you keep it figuratively underneath you in the sim and not making mistakes when it's so easy to do so at a very difficult track like Daytona. You talk about how flat that infield portion of the track is. You get off it into the grass and there's pretty much a tire barrier not that far away at all points.
It's an interesting principle that I've heard a lot of real-life drivers talk about over the course of iRacing's existence, really, that you don't have that feel in the seat, especially when you feel the rear end start to go around or you lose grip there. And you have to sort of train yourself a little bit differently. You have to learn how to control these cars with your eyes a little bit more and get a sense of when the rear end is stepping out based off of what you're seeing and what you're hearing as opposed to what you're feeling. So I almost wonder if it's sort of like maybe going to a training session with a blindfold on and you sort of heighten different senses, but at the end of the day, you can take what you learn with your eyes here and apply it to the real world and ultimately, Justin, make yourself a more well-rounded driver.
And Albuquerque was one of the drivers who actually talked about entering this week about some of the differences, whereas he makes this pass with the pole in the draft, where he said in his sim race, he's been sim racing since the days when the throttle was A on the computer keyboard and the brake was the B button, essentially. But some drivers put thousands upon thousands of laps in preparation for these types of events, while others are looking to have fun. And he leans towards the fun side. We're seeing some of the drivers, though, who may have put in the work, but also may have that raw, natural pace that we've seen back in 2020.
And see this four-way battle. Milner in ninth, a little bit off of the back of a trio, I would say, with Eastwood, Westbrook, and Edwards, 6th, 7th, and 8th on the track right now. That puts them about 4 to 5 seconds off of the race leaders, so still in touch at the top half of the field. Remember, 23 drivers started this race, and at the moment, there are 21 of them still on track. And you can see back here, down through the bus stop at a back straightaway, that's 8, 9, 10, and 11 all at once, that you do need to be careful to not overstep track limits on the sim. If you do so, you will be given a slowdown penalty. We've seen that, guys, many a times with sports car and prototype racing here at Daytona on the sim, especially late in races, right? When guys really try to push things. If you go cut a corner, you will be given a time penalty, be forced to slow down and give up a position. Here's a second look at an incident further back in the back. That's the 88 car diving to the inside, the 33. So that is Harry Gottsacker making a move in the International Horseshoe. And then they go down side by side. It's a very thin left-hand kink right here in turn 4. And that did not work out for the driver at a San Antonio, Texas. And his Brian Hurta Autosport machine all over the road, and that cost him not just time but positions. Had to come to a stop to serve that slowdown penalty.
I would argue that that kink in the middle, the dog leg in the infield, is the toughest corner on this racetrack with this P217 in particular, and especially if you're going too wide through it, because I think you really get a sense of just how full tilt you are. You are absolutely on the edge every time you go through that corner, and it's also arguably the narrowest corner on this racetrack too. So you combine that, go 2x2 with it, up the degree of difficulty a little bit more. Not a huge surprise that we see one car, in this case Gonsacker, go off into the grass.
Yeah, so easy to do when you don't want to enter that side-by-side, to say the very least. But keep in mind that still a draft lock essentially for some of the drivers that are trying to recover from the mistakes. Albuquerque is trying to now take advantage of that, and this is going to really help him in NASCAR, going through NASCAR 3 and 4 specifically, to try and get a pole and try and leapfrog one more position. He's lost 5 spots, keep in mind, this race. Robbie Foley, have to say, though, despite the apparent damage on his car, has been doing a great job going back and forth here. They have continued to scrap for this spot all race.
Remember, last time we checked in, it was Koch ahead of Foley, where they started 3rd and 4th respectively, but Robbie Foley has since been able to make that pass once more, and he is ahead of Koch. 3rd car in line, the number 28 machine here on board with a virtual visor cam. That is Daniel Morat in the 28 machine, up 1 spot from the start of the race.
Murad's got a really great view of this battle, and Murad is one of the drivers who really has embraced this platform. I'm seeing him streaming on Twitch multiple times on his own channel, trying to reach out to his community, Justin, and really build his following through sim racing and through iRacing, in addition to what he does in the real world.
And so many drivers have been doing that in 2020, where we talked about it a little bit, where they're investing in sim racing, starting their own organizations, getting involved with other organizations as well, and trying to race as much as they can across the entire service. There's a reason that sim racing helped increase in 2020, and it's one of the main things where drivers are realizing that they want to be a part of the community and want to be able to race on tracks such as this. You can already see how much he's having to put in motion-wise and from the force feedback through the corners on top of things to try and keep up here with this grouping.
And to continue that discussion, right, it's much more than us right now looking at GTLM drivers per se driving these LMP2s, right, the sports cars and the prototypes. I mean, you could have that crossover in the sim within this IMSA iRacing Pro Series, but over the course of last year, you know, we saw all real-life racing to basically come to a stop for months on end, and we saw all these virtual series kick up because, listen, these guys are racers, right, through and through. They don't care what they're driving, if it's real, if it's simulated, and what the car is, they want it to be on track. We've also seen a handful of these drivers foray outside of these cars, and you know that's the beauty of the iRacing service is you could race these cars, you could race you know, oval racing cars, you could race other road stuff, and everything in between. It really is just limited by your imagination and your ambition on what you want to tackle on the surface. Watching two battles on track now, top half of your screen, the battle for third, still led at the moment by Robbie Foley as he fights with Kenton Cook and Daniel Morad, and down in ninth position, another two-way fight between Riley Dickinson, and that's Tommy Milner behind him.
The battle for ninth is beginning to get better with each passing lap, but that P3 battle has been intense all race long. I feel like Foley and Cook have been swapping spots seemingly every other lap, and maybe not a huge surprise that, you know, we talked a little bit, JP, about Andrews and Hysan having those fast practice times and being up at the front and, you know, predictably so. Same sort of thing, I think, for Foley and Cook, who both have extended their reach into iRacing individually over the course of the past year.
Yeah, especially Foley. We mentioned the zebra spawning, working with the official sim team, essentially for BMW for this event today. He's now stuck on the bottom side, though, as they go back and forth yet again. Another pull with the draft.
And that's where it's really going to benefit the 8 for the entirety of this run, right, is that Foley has said he's got damaged. It's not enough damage to slow him way down, but 3 miles an hour at the end of, you know, that part of the racetrack on the high banks and then down to the front stretch, it's going to be difficult. Now, you know, we've seen Foley retake this position before. Who's to say that it's not going to happen again? But now that 28 machine behind definitely wants to make his own charge, right? I mean, you want to continuously make moves forward. We haven't seen a ton of drivers up front either go forwards or backwards, right? You got a handful of drivers up a spot here and there. I know that Riley Dickinson in that battle for ninth is up 3 from where he started, but aside from that, haven't seen anybody fall way off or pick up a lot. We've seen these battles, 4 cars, 5 cars here or there, where have you, but nobody's made big mistakes. Nobody's made huge gains. Granted, only 17 or so minutes into this 1 hour sprint race, but you know, if you want to keep going forwards, when you see somebody like an injured Foley fall back, you need to jump on that and try to make a charge here on Coke, not close enough to the bus stop.
Big part of the issue, you look at the last lap times that these drivers set, they were all within 4/10 of one another. Everybody in the top 5 basically running the same lap time. So to some degree, Justin, it's going to be hard to make the moves when you're all pushing and you all end up in the same spot. These drivers are giving it everything, as you see the 96 going underneath the 8 machine, but you're stuck on the same lap times. It's hard to really gauge on anybody if you're pressing as hard as these drivers are.
Exactly. You gotta love the sounds of these cars on top of things, Evan. With the zooming, with the zips and zooms around this circuit, they really roar and purr around this track. And when you really get yourself a good boost, it really feels on good for your car, as I believe the 81's lost a couple seconds to your leader.
Yeah, we're starting to see a bit of separation up front. Andrews pulling now some 2.2 seconds ahead of Heightstand for the number 2 spot. So Andrews in the 74 taking control of this race as we near kind of the midway portion of this one. But just as you mentioned, it doesn't matter if it's at the real track or the sim track. You want to take in the sights and sounds. This is the virtual Daytona International Speedway. Consistently some of the best stuff on track. This battle that we continue to watch from Foley on back for third, fourth, and fifth, and a great look in, guys, at the different and various sim rigs that all the drivers in today's race at home are sporting. I mentioned off at the top, in a fixed setup race with only one class. Everybody in these LMP2s, they are all even equipment-wise in sim, and I made the important distinction to specify that, James, because of course another aspect of sim racing is, I talked about it's kind of left to your imagination on what you want to do in the sim, kind of what you want to race. Well, that applies at home as well, as far as what you want to do with your sim rig at home. It can be something as easy if you're interested, in going sim racing, you're a big IMSA fan, enjoy watching the races, and say, hey, that'd be fun. I want to go drive, an LMP2 at Daytona or a GTE car at Road Atlanta. You can jump onto the sim and do that, and kind of how far you take that's up to your imagination. Some pretty cool setups from some of those drivers.
I've seen some wild things in some sessions, and that's part of the beauty of iRacing, is that you really can mix it up. I think maybe one of my favorites was I saw one of these LMP2s at Wild West Motorsports Park, which is usually a truck course more than anything else on dirt. But hey, that's iRacing. That's the beauty of it, Justin Prince. You can dream up just about any combination, and even if you wouldn't necessarily see it in real life, even if it might be too expensive to make some of these combos happen in the real world, in iRacing you can do it all virtually.
And there's a reason people like to have fun, and that's some of the ways to have fun, is try something different and try different combinations to see how they can work out, if the car is going to end up being able to handle the racetrack, as well as to see how well you can run the car at said track and get some laps around it. We mentioned the importance of being able to test laps on top of things. This isn't a very vital thing where, say there's a discussion or the possibility of something, you can try it out and see, okay, will this work or will this not work?
Yeah, there's the duality of, anybody can drive on the sim. I count myself in that category as well. Not fast, but enjoy doing it for fun. Or we can go out there and get as close to a real-life experience as you'll ever get, right? Driving a high-powered LMP2 car like this at a place as famous as Daytona. And then there's the other half where you have these real-world pros doing it for actual practice time. Maybe been a year since you've been to Daytona Beach. You want to remind yourself of some of your braking points up onto the iRacing service. And at least you're that step closer to not being as rusty when you load into the real, Daytona International Speedway later this month for the Rolex 24. Just saw Foley and Koch swap out third and fourth again. Here's another battle that is headed down the back straightaway part of the racetrack. At the end of the bus stop, it's Benjamin Waddle in 14th, ahead of Gregory Lafugi in 15th. So both these drivers up from the start of the race. They've taken advantage of quite a rough go for the triple three guys of Nicholas Booley. He's fallen off 4 spots from the start of this race, and it's allowed this trio of cars now that we look up to get around him.
Again, the draft so powerful. How about 3 wide, or at least they thought about it going into turn 1, and then actually go 3 wide into turn 1, and the 99 goes sideways. So driver's certainly not afraid to try and push it, Justin.
That was not going to work, and that was just not going to work. First of all, going under the line to make a 3 wide and get the squeeze up, but second, just way too tight there. Waddle tried to give the squeeze. I think he expected a little bit more spaced on back towards that middle lane car again, Anthony Vogie. It's going to be where you need to be able to maintain your aggression, as in pick your spots, and that time it was a bad spot for all of them.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting. Turn 1, lap 1, granted, that's from 200 miles an hour. You can see Waddle on the outside there. Wanted to get some sort of a turn into the corner. You just can't do that, right? With Lafugi in the middle there, and he kind of cut down on him, got a little bit of a touch, and it was a pretty harmless spin off and into the runoff area. He only loses 1 position. That was James French, who was able to get on by him, and now they fall back to about 16th and 17th, just ahead of the triple three of Nicholas Boulay, who I just mentioned, and dropped back from the start of this race, allowing those very same drivers to pick up spots early in this one, and now it becomes a 2-way battle for positions 14th and 15th, or I guess I should say even further up the road as we take a look back once more at the battle for third position. You got to think that these guys are going to be tired anytime soon. High stand in the 81 has fallen back to this trio, right? For the first quarter of this race, it was Andrews and High stand who pulled away, and then it was this trio. But you can see the 81 had started to fall back. We mentioned about 5 laps ago or so that gap between first and second had started to stretch. We are really seeing it now because Heitstand is within striking distance of Koch, who leads this trio of cars, who I don't think have had more than 6 or 7 car lengths in between them from the start of this race.
The difference in lap times between Heitstand and this group with Foley and Cook and Murat and company isn't all that much. It's been maybe half a tenth to a tenth here and there, lap on lap on lap. It's not huge, but you add it up over 10, 15 laps, and then it starts to become, half a second, a full second. And that's sort of what we're seeing with the 81 car, that ever so slowly, he's coming back to the 96, back to the 8, and that should leave us with a 4-car battle for second once they all catch the 81 car.
Yeah, these tires have really gone off of Heistad's car. He's been falling off a tenth a lap to Scott Andrews' pace at the moment. The fall off for much of the field has been about 9/10 of a second. So at this point, if you're Heistad, you have to start trying to figure out, okay, I got to try and break the draft up a little bit potentially, as well as think big picture, because they are approaching that fuel mark about 10, 11 minutes from now. It's where we expect a lot of the drivers to duck down. Some of them are starting to peel off towards the mid-pack of note, like Riley Dickinson. But at the moment, we're expecting these drivers to keep on pushing until they can put in the least amount of fuel they can in their cars, so they're a bit more lighter and quicker down the straights.
And Boulay also just off of the pit lane, as well as John Edwards. We had taken it on the board look with him. Your 2020 Rolex 24 at Daytona GTLM class winner has also been down pit road. So you can see basically right halfway home in this preseason invitational, about 30 minutes down on the clock and 30 minutes to go. Well within that fuel window to come down to the pit lane. But expecting a majority of the field maybe to run it closer to empty on this first one and to make that second run to the end of the race a little bit shorter. Not a ton of fall off tire-wise, depending on who you're talking about, anywhere in the range of a half a second to a full second, the lap times that they're running now compared to the hot laps that they put in very early in this one.
So then you do a little bit of math, Justin, and you think these drivers probably should be down pit road within about the next 10 minutes or so. Like you said earlier, it's about 40 minutes to a full run of fuel in these prototypes. So get a 40-minute run to start, a 20-minute run to finish off this race as Robbie Foley goes to the outside here in the tri-oval.
And I think that was coming, that pass should note there with that quick bit of slipstream, but they have already lost a couple seconds trying to scrap and set things on up. Foley doing a very impressive job today, as taking a look at some of these cars, you can really see they're really losing the grip on these tires. But to get to your fuel discussion, the main thing's going to be how much fuel do they put in, because fuel is time when it comes to the pit stops. The more time you spend in the pit box, the more fuel you end up putting in. Some of the drivers, 37 seconds already who have taken some service. Others, 26. Others, they can fill up the full tank, but it takes about 50 seconds. So if you are willing to gamble and know your calculations on the gas, that's going to be very crucial to be able to gain time.
I'm curious if this group of cars is going to influence his decision pit strategy wise, right? If you try to come down to the pit lane maybe a little bit earlier than you want to, just to get away. Yes, it's a short race. Yes, it's a sprint. And I'm sure these guys are having a blast being all over each other, but maybe their heart rate would appreciate if they had a little bit more space. So if you're trying to get away from this group, if you're a Koch, if you're a Morad in the middle of all of this, just come down to the pit lane a lap earlier, try to push it out later. Just try to get yourself some space. Get a good in lap or a good out lap and try to break free. We really haven't seen a group this big stick together anywhere else on track. There's been some two-way battles. Eastwood and Westbrook have been 6th and 7th for some time. They basically followed each other all afternoon. You got guys like Chavez and Lafugi, 12th and 13th, who have been pretty close from the get-go. But this group of 3, sometimes as many as 5, really haven't had many opportunities tonight to just log laps. And I wonder if that's forcing them to maybe overdrive these cars a tad bit, wear on those tires, and that's why somebody like an Andrews leading is nearly 5 seconds ahead.
We see the 33 machine come down pit road. That's Harry Gottsacker. But you brought up a good point, Evan, that I want to touch back on, that with as tight as these lap times has been, given that these drivers have been within maybe 2-3 tenths of one another, especially in the top 10 throughout the duration of this race, my hunch is that an undercut, even by just one lap, might make a huge amount of difference. And if you're trying to get around somebody, Justin, I almost think that that might be the best way to try and make that happen. You're not going to see all that much difference different on track. I think we've seen that here just with as tight as these drivers are running. So if you're going to make a move and try and really make something happen, I feel like an early pit stop is about the only way you're going to have some sort of significant impact.
I agree on that one. And while, yes, you lose the toe by coming into pit such as that can help you on the straights. Here's the kicker. If you're strong in the infield, especially when you're on your own and you don't have that restriction, essentially you have a draft lock train, that can be where you can balance out the time and gain time, actually, on the rest of the circuit. So, exactly, with the amount of off on some of these cars, 100% agree. It's going to be crucial as your race leader's in.
So from the top spot, we talked about if it would be somebody in that secondary group to lead down pit road. Instead, it is race leader Scott Andrews. He is not the only one in, though. Robbie Foley also down pit road. Richard Westbrook in. So a height stand will reassume the race lead for the moment. That's him in the 81 machine, trailed by Koch and then Morad. Expecting once those leaders have kicked things off that we should see the rest of these cars down pit road in pretty quick order.
I noticed when he came into his pit stall, Robbie Foley had to back it up ever so slightly. He overshot by maybe a hair, but it was just enough. That may slow the 96 down. He may lose some time when he comes down to pit road, JP.
Yeah, that's going to lose him at least half a second potentially, if not a full second. You cannot afford to mess up coming into the pit box with how fine the line is where you are in terms of where you need to stop and where you need to hit your marks. More cars continue to rumble on in, and you can tell some of these cars are just sending it in hard, trying to make sure they send it as late as they can onto the brakes to try and carry as much speed as they can without massively sliding the tires as they start to fight again.
Side by side, down the back straightaway, he will let him go. So Morad takes the spot. Koch thinks better of it, tucks back in line, and will try again. Now let's see with high stand, open it up at an advantage and starting to close in now on some lap traffic with Harry Godsacker just up the road. Do these leaders dive to pit road now? 22 laps have been complete so far from Daytona, and height stand will stay on track. No commitment to pit road. But Kenton Koch is in, locks it up, smokes the tires. A little bit close, I think. Pit road speed limit, 55 miles an hour.
It was tight there from Kenton Koch. And one thing I've noticed throughout this race is these tires have worn down. Seems like drivers are having trouble getting back onto the banking as the 7 car of Tommy Milner makes his way down pit road. But I'm noticing a little bit more slip out of the rear tires when these cars exit the infield and go back onto NASCAR 1. I wonder if that may be more pronounced as we get deeper into this race, Justin, and the tires get older and older.
I think so, and it's something that happens in several different types of cars because of how slick that section of the racetrack is, and as well, you're essentially going from what is essentially the apron for super speedway races right up to the main banking. You can see right here just how much rubber's been laid out already, and some of these drivers are just struggling with that little bit of transition to where you're going essentially flat to just about half of that banking already for the 31 degrees in the corners. And that, I think, is just destabilizing those tires, and it's going to get more and more tire slippage and cost drivers more and more time as the night goes on, or the day goes on, rather.
An important thing we mentioned earlier in this race as well as we take the onboard look there coming out of the bus stop and back up onto the racetrack in turn number 12 is that we had mentioned some drivers had gotten damage from some calamity a little bit earlier on in this race. If they've already pitted, would have had the opportunity to come down pit road and get a quick repair if they deem necessary. Here's a dive to pit road again, getting every little bit they can out of it. High stand down and on board with Daniel Moran, who's also down pit road directly from behind him. So first and second are back onto pit road, and that will hand things over. The control car is going to be Kenton Koch, new race leader, guys, as the 8 car leapfrogs the 74 in the pit cycle. And there was a big discrepancy in the time on pit road. It looks like that Koch at least only spent about 43 seconds on pit road, whereas Scott Andrews spent 54 seconds. That's how his big advantage from the race lead has been erased, and Koch will cycle through to the race lead, presumably here. We'll see where he ends up because Morad and Height Stand are coming out of the pit lane. You'll see them left-hand side of your screen. Who wins out in this battle? Do they get ahead of the 8 car? At least one of them will, if not both, and Richard Height Stand cycles to the race lead.
That's impressive from Highstand, especially because he overshot his pit stall like Foley did, even more so, I think, than Foley did when he came down pit road. So big for the 81 to maintain the race lead. But with Coke, Justin, I have to believe that's him and Morad, too. Just looking at the times here, they both are playing the fuel game, and they're going to put it right on the edge. Looks like they only put as much fuel as they needed in their cars to get to the very end of this race. That's why their pit stops were about 10 seconds faster than the stops of those around them, and that's why they're now in second and third.
Yep, they exactly did what I was talking about. Fuel was time, and they were able to calculate the exact amount of fuel they needed in the tank right to the get-go. Now it's going to be a matter of, did they make sure they have that a little tiny bit of a buffer just in case? There have been events this week even here at the circuit across the iRacing service where drivers have run out coming to the checker flag. You don't want that to happen, and now as a result of the strategy cars, it's going to be interesting. Scott Andrews with that extra bit of fuel is going to have that safe mark, but he's going to have to somehow close up 4 seconds and an estimated 14 laps.
And side by side for second as Coke tries to work to the outside of Morad. I thought Coke was going to be the big winner in all of this, but then Morad and Heightstand took that same strategy from him. They're all going to kind of stack up into turn number 1. Side by side, Morad going to hold the bottom, and it will maintain 1, 2, 3, no change there. And I think that 4 second now, just 3.7 second difference between Andrews and the rest of the field is going to be important. Remember, he had pulled 5 seconds over the rest of the field, so in theory, if he can maintain that same pace, he could catch these drivers by the end of it. And here's a look, by the way, on pit road with Heightstand, who missed his pit stall. He started this race on pole. He's the number 1 box, but went a little bit too far, had to back it up, even with that mistake, was faster on pit road than everybody else, guys. So that tells me that he took even less fuel when he made that mistake. So he may be the most at risk of these 4 cars fighting for the race win.
It's certainly something that we'll need to watch over the course of these last 20 minutes and change, but it's so wild that that little mistake costs him what had been about a 3 to 4 second lead over the second place cars before they came down pit road. And I think it underscores a theme that we've seen throughout this race of how the tiniest of margins can make the biggest of differences because pace is relatively level, especially throughout the top 10.
Here's the thought process, though, too. There is a very viable strategy that teams really use on iRacing especially is double stinting for these types of races. Heinstead, Moran, and Coke believe might have done that, guys, because Andrews took tires. Was checking on the nice side of things. Coke did not take tires. So this lead just had an extra wrinkle because Andrews closed up the gap to 3 seconds in 1 lap.
On a spin, and Heightstand from the race lead is around in turn number 1. He had driven it in hard, and that was on his own. Overdrove the entry, locked up the tires, and in the blink of an eye, Heightstand falls from 1st to 4th, and now Kenton Coke takes over the race lead.
Coke gets the lead. I think Morad just got away with a clean race car. I wasn't sure if he had gotten into the 81 there, but it looks like the 28 is okay. But the big story here, as JP noted, Andrews on the fresh tires was a full second faster than these front 2 cars that last time by. So the 74 machine is charging.
And he's already right there as well. Let's take a look at the reason why here, as you'll see on the onboard, just so easy on older tires to just lock it up or lose the back end. If you send it too hard, try to carry as much as you can, and right there, just swings around, does get a little bit of the right front right there. Lucky, not significant damage, but that cost them all that buffer they just had.
That was a great avoidance and a great onboard look there as they avoided that incident. So now Coke, as mentioned, goes to the race lead. Second is Morad, and Scott Andrews, who was once upon a time 4 seconds back just 2 laps ago, is already in the battle for the lead. You know, he's got enough fuel to the end. He doesn't have to worry about conserving anything, and he is on the move, trying to challenge first Morad in a battle for 3rd and 2nd. Drive it in real deep into turn number 1. We saw that bite Heightstand, but for the moment, Andrews pretty fearless. He is going to put it to him. It's a 3-way battle for the race lead. Morad now looking on Coke for the top spot.
I'm not sure who's feeling the pressure the most, whether or not it's Koch, Morad, or Andrews, because Koch just went wide on the exit of turn 1 there. So now the 28 is all over the rear wing of the 8 machine. And if either of them get together, then Scott Andrews should be able to go right on by. As you see the headlights flash, the mind games are beginning between Morad and Koch for the race lead late in the going.
Yes, just received confirmation from a crew on that on the old tires, and that's going to make it even more difficult to try and defend here, especially coming out of the corners, especially with how much they've been sliding. Kenneth Koch already almost to the safer barrier. He's been bouncing so hard out of the transition.
Working hard, using every inch of this racetrack, guys. And if we were at the point with 5 minutes to go, 4 minutes to go, right, a lap and change, I feel like these drivers would have a chance, but there is so much time left on the clock. There's Andrews trying to go to the outside. It was a game of chicken, and they all backed out of it. So Koch maintains the race lead for the moment. I just don't see how you hold off Andrews as fast as he's been for 16 more minutes.
You can hold off one of them. I just don't know if you'll be able to hold off 2 of them, and that's what we're going to have to watch. Watch here as they come through the tri-oval and go down to the apron. There goes Morad, just full send, completely on the flat part of the racetrack to get the race lead away from Kenton Koch, who just about got into the 28. I think he may have, and sent the 28 wide. So Koch gets the lead back, and the 74 now jumps out to second, and now it's the big issue of can you hold on to the lead when Scott Andrews has the fresh tires, Justin?
Yeah, especially since he has been coming through and quick. He was pulling these drivers on the long run, and just like that, the better traction gets him. Andrews with the pass, and that's the help of the fresh tires, Evan, just like that, able to make the pass.
Koch got a little bit too much curb, I think, trying to get into the gas, knowing that Andrews was on his outside. That car twitched loose just for a split second. Andrews did not break traction going the long way around, and he did it the hard way, but back to the race lead after the pit cycle is Scott Andrews, and this battle for second and third is still going to be real good through the rest of this race. Don't forget, Heitstand, despite that spin, is only about 2 seconds and change behind these drivers. So if they start to mix it up, we could see that 4th placed car come back into the picture, but it is home free for Scott Andrews. His race to lose at this point. Next time by the line, he'll see about 15 minutes to go.
And now the pressure is entirely on the 28 of Daniel Morad, I think, because the last few laps, the 28's been faster than Kenton Koch and that 8 machine, and I think Morad knows it too, but he's got to find the spot to either force Koch into a mistake or just be aggressive and make that move. But if Morad wants any shot at keeping pace with Andrews, which I think he can reasonably, tires are old, but he's not near as far off on lap times as Koch is to Andrews, but he's got to make the move on Kenton Koch soon if he wants any sort of shot whatsoever for it, maybe winning this.
Especially since those rear tires, you can see just bouncing around Kenneth Koch's car. It's just, Kenneth Koch, I should rather say, it's just a matter of he needs to do it quick, as you said. He can't do it at a bad spot. This is not going to be the smartest move here in the dog leg.
And that's a smart call there by Koch to back out of that. We were talking about that left-hand kink turn 4 earlier in this race, how it may be one of the tightest, if not the tightest corner on this track. That's tough enough to do with 1 car. 2 wide was definitely not working, and Morad wins out in that battle. Moving up to second position, Kenton Koch now drops back down to 3rd, and then Heitstand trailing from the number 4 spot. For a bunch of this race, right, it's been these 4. Robbie Foley's been awfully quiet after the pit stops. He was as high as 3rd many times tonight, fighting with the likes of Kenton Koch, but that damage had slowed him down off of the get-go. He should have most of that repaired by now. It sounds like he took tires when he was down on pit road. He rides in 5th position at the moment. His pit stop was about 13 seconds longer than those drivers ahead of him. Same thing that we saw out of Andrews. So that's why Foley lost track position through the pit stops. As we go side by side again for second, though, Koch does not want to give this one up, and he'll take it right back on the outside.
So what does Morad do coming into turn 1? So many different lines you can take in this corner of the racetrack. I think in that sense, it's the most diverse of all the corners on Daytona's road courses. That 8 just wiggles around. Kenton Koch is fighting for grip. Meanwhile, Foley behind all these drivers does have the fresh tires. His pit time and Scott Andrews' pit time were nearly identical. So there's your confirmation that the 96 is on fresh rubber, and he too should make a charge just like Andrews did to close this race out.
Yeah, and taking a look right here, and take a look at those hands down at the bottom of the screen coming out of the corners especially, where he's having to do a lot of counter steering as soon as he gets on towards the gas. That car seems to really bobble a little bit more so for Kenneth Koch's car than it is for Miranda at the moment. And you can tell right there, just again, felt it snap a little bit, felt it snap a second and third time just about, where he's having to counter steer to make sure he doesn't completely snap that car around.
Great stuff in the battle for second. Kenton Koch, Daniel Morad going at it right now for second and third position. You can see a bit of a sigh that time, an opportunity to regain composure and then go again. He nearly ran him over in turn number 6. I mean, there's been so many times in this race where these cars have either slightly touched or almost touched and could have certainly ended in tears, but at least for the moment, it continues and gives us a great battle for second and third. Here's the big run off at turn number 12 towards the start-finish line. Same spot where we saw the pass from Koch on the last lap. This time, Morad takes it back. Second is his once more, but for how long? Expect this to continue through the rest of the race. Heitstand has already come onto the scene in fourth, and then not that further back either is Fresh Tires' Robbie Foley, P5. It's a four-way battle for second.
All of a sudden, this just got really good for P2 because you got different strategies converging on one another. And as some drivers are fading on the old tires, you're seeing others charge through the field on fresh tires. And they're all sort of meeting here in this one point. As Murad had to kick it sideways, he was a little bit wide in the West Horseshoe right there. So you can see just how tight this is. They're all within combined, maybe about 1.5 seconds, third, fourth, and fifth.
And that's going to shrink too with Robbie Foley coming in quick. It's a matter of when he times this up. I think if I'm Foley, I wait until at least the run again to turn 1. Try and pick off one car there. If you have the speed, try and do something similar to Scott Andrews. Take the car on the outside if you have the confidence. Looking like he's thinking about the bus stop, though, to make it 3 wide.
Does it work? Koch drops out side by side of the bus stop. Robbie Foley takes 2 spots with 1 swing of the bat. He'll go from position number 4 all the way up to 3rd. So 5th to 3rd it is. What a move by the 96. He initially wanted to go to the outside. That spot was taken by Heitstand. Went to the inside, made it work. Here comes the counter though. Heitstand with the momentum. He'll go to the outside. Koch doesn't want to force 3 wide. They touch, and Heitstand misses turn 1. He's into the runoff.
When you're on edge like that, it's so easy to upset the balance on these prototypes, and it was just that slight contact between Foley and Heitstand that sent the 81 wide in turn 1, and now gives Foley sole possession of P3. But that was a power play on the back straightaway there, Justin. A beautiful move from Foley, and especially to have that confidence to just send it without fear into the bus stop the way he did. You don't necessarily get that pass every time you try it, but every once in a while it sticks. So credit in the 96 for the fearlessness to go get 3rd spot.
And I think it was Evan who mentioned there's the possibility of incidents ending in tears in some case. That was one of those where if you do it the wrong way, that's where a lot of it can trigger, as well as anger potentially. But Foley timed it up right. I think it was mainly to Evan, where they were side by side up in front of him. I think he thought, you know what, may as well take a shot here since they're slowing each other up. Try and jump on forward, get myself to Murad, try and get myself to 2nd.
It was a great move, and now he sets his sights on the number 2 spot as he chases down Daniel Morad. So he is closing down with fresh tires. The advantage certainly to Foley here, but with a little bit less time than maybe he would appreciate. A handful of laps still to go, about 6 laps maybe left with the time remaining. Should be able to give Morad a challenge, but we've seen so many times that 28 car get passed up tonight and go right back on the counterattack. This is not going to be an easy overtake in the battle for 2nd and 3rd. And as these guys have been racing, we're side by side. Heitstand just made a pass out of Koch behind. They're allowing Charlie Eastwood with fresh tires from P6 to close in as well. So all of the battling that these drivers have done have taken them a mile out of the battle for the race lead. It has allowed drivers who we haven't talked much about pit stops onward, 6th on back, Eastwood, Miller, and others to close in. You're on board with Morad there, trying to hang on with Foley in the behind there. there. Looking in the backside, you can see the left-hand side of shoes. We talked about the difference in the in-sim rigs. He's using those triple monitors, right? You can see a left monitor on his onboard camera there. He's not really darting around, right? So he seems pretty calm, I'd say, all things considered, with Foley putting the heat down. Here he comes.
That's the one thing that I've noticed watching Murad's onboards throughout this race is that compared to a lot of the other drivers around him, Murad is very cool, very calm, very collected. You don't look at him and think that he's incredibly flustered, even though he has older tires and that car might not be handling as well as it did earlier on in the race. I feel like he's in the right mindset to try and hang on, which is why I think of the passes that Foley's made over the last 5 laps or so. If he's going to get Murad, this is going to be the toughest test that the 96 cars had on this run.
And you can already see those eyes trying to move up towards the mirror and keep an eye on that, especially at the run. The tough part when it's going to be for Murad is he's got the much older tires, right? And while he's been able to keep the rear tires much more stable, much more confident on there to where he's not losing tons of time, I mean, compare that to Robbie Foley in the corner speed. That's going to be the difference as well, especially where they enter the corner braking-wise. So Foley may try and just tuck up and be patient, but then again, last time I said that he sent it 3, and now this may be the door opening up a little bit, Murad, a little bit higher up on the grip.
You have to be concerned every time if you're the driver of the 28 machine that you get up and onto the high banks at Daytona. In the infield, those tires are going to help a little bit, yes, but mainly it's that draft that you need to be concerned about. The tires keep Foley close, and it's that draft on the banking that'll seemingly put him over the edge. With 6 minutes left to go at the virtual Daytona International Speedway. Out of the left-hander, that's turn number 6, backing up onto the Daytona high banks. Here he comes. We've seen them jockey for position so many times in the run down to the bus stop. They'll be at nearly 200 miles an hour by the time they get there. Foley has a run, but backs off. Doesn't want to force the move just yet.
I've been watching the last few laps, and you would figure at this point, with Foley only about 0.3 of a second back at the 28, that he would start feeling the effects of the draft. And I haven't been able to tell whether or not he's been laying back or whether or not, even with the help of the draft, he's having trouble catching the number 28. Maybe that's part of the damage that we think he got towards the rear end of that car very early on in this race. But now it kicks in, now it comes. There's the 96 to the outside. The question, JP, is whether or not this sticks into one.
And just like that, in fact, Daniel Murad giving him the space there. So I think he realized what was going on there. Just let him have the space. Just don't overuse the tires there. And I think Murad's right now feeling like he's in a confident spot. He might hold on to third. The question is going to be Charlie Eastwood, since he is the fastest car on the racetrack.
There's a handful of battles. Eastwood on the move, and speaking of that, Richard Westbrook just made a pass on Kenton Koch for 6th and 7th. So those other drivers I mentioned that we haven't talked a ton about since then, I've been making moves with the decision to come down for fresh tires. Westbrook, a 2-time runner-up in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship GTLM category. He is now in position 6. So the fresh tires have won out, though, right? They've gotten Andrews back to the race lead, Foley to 2nd. Murad may be in a position to try to hang on to a podium, but to Justin's point there, James, with Charlie Eastwood only about 2 seconds off, that could be a nail-biter with about 3 laps left with 4 minutes on the clock.
Valid points all around as you see Scott Andrews in the bottom of your screen. We haven't forgotten about him. He's just, 6 seconds and change clear of the rest of the field. So not much to talk about with the race leader. The talk is about these fresh tires, where you look at the leaderboard, 4 out of the top 6 drivers in this field right now are on the fresh rubber. So I think you are right. It was close. It was tight. It took a while for them to kick in, Evan, but the fresh rubber seems to have won out. And the biggest question, as you said, is whether or not Eastwood is going to have the chance to catch Murad, Justin.
Yeah, and that was the thought process I was having a little bit in my head towards the pit stops, thinking drivers are going to take some tires, but some of them are starting to heat up with the drivers who double stinted here on them. Tommy Milner, we've seen him back and forth from amongst the top 10 today. Ken Koch, who is still trying to hold on to those rear tires. He has been lighting up those rear ends this entire run, constantly snapping off the corners.
Yeah, remember, he was way up in the battle for the lead and up towards the front of the field after the pit cycle. Kenton Koch was scored in third position. With that pass, Tommy Miller making a pass on him. He has fallen all the way down to position number 8. So the very clear consensus is that, well, it did cost you about an extra 10 to 12 seconds on pit road during the cycle, that fresh tires at that point has certainly been to the benefit. The cars on fresh tires have gained more positions than they have lost. That's why we're seeing Eastwood close in on Murad for fourth and third position. Eastwood, fresh rubber. Murad does not have it. Here's the battle now, side by side on the infield portion of the racetrack. Back in P12, it's got Gottsacker, Dickinson, Waddle all in the mix. It's not just up front that the pit strategy is coming into play. This, though, a battle with 3 cars who did take tires.
This should be fun, I think, because it looks like immediately the first thing I noticed watching these drivers is that they're more aggressive with the throttle and the brake on corner entry and exit, so they've slid around a little bit more. So I feel like these drivers are a little bit more on the edge of their seats than some of the folks a little bit closer to the front. We should see a good battle, JP, down into the bus stop.
So as we watch these 3 and to that point try to make up some positions and to see if they can get a little bit more, right? This is some 40 seconds off of the race lead, so they feel like there's maybe a little bit less to lose, James. It's not a points-paying round of the IMSA iRacing Pro Series, right? This is all for bragging rights. It's a preseason invitational, so they just want to get that extra spot, right? I think they're having a blast here. Deep into the corner that time was Dakota Dickerson, nearly squeezing to the outside. Harry Gottsacker can't find the spot, tucks in line. This trio will reset and try again. No move from Waddle, diving down into the horseshoe. But up front and maybe approaching what could be the last lap of this race is Scott Andrews in the 74. He's opened up an 8-second advantage over the rest of the field. The battle for third going to be awfully tight on this final lap because Eastwood is closing on Murad one final time. Andrews looking, though, for the white flag.
Clean, calm, cool, collected, fast. If you want to describe Scott Andrews' run this afternoon, it's been that and then some. Nailed the tire wear too, as we see that battle a little bit further back between Murad and company still raging as they go off and win for the last time.
Tried it on the outside, wasn't able to make it stick. He'll try again. Literally the last opportunity here for Eastwood. He may decide to make the dive either to the bus stop or coming to the start-finish line on the last lap of this race. Looks for the undercut at the International Horseshoe in 3. Still can't do it. This battle for third and fourth going to go all the way to the checkered flag.
Doesn't look like it puts the issue in the horseshoe, Will Eastwood. So now the question is, where do you make the move? I didn't think outside of the west horseshoe was going to be the answer there, and that'll cost him a little bit of the time. So that effectively means he's not going to have a shot until he gets to the bus stop, as your leader is already on to the NASCAR banking in turns 1 and 2.
Driver out of Miami, Florida for R8G Esports. Started this race second in qualifying, but took over the race lead early with a pass to Robbie Foley at that point in the race and Scott Andrews. But as they've cycled through to the top spot, Andrews found himself on the back foot through the pit cycle, made the right decision to put fresh tires on his number 74, and he is home free for the final time in turn number 12. Scott Andrews off of the final corner, gonna kick off 2021 with a win in the IMSA iRacing Pro Series. He wins the preseason invitational at Daytona, some 7 seconds ahead of Foley. Here's the battle for third. Eastwood to the outside of Morad, side by side, they touch to the line, and in a photo finish, Morad hangs on to a podium spot.
And what a finish for those drivers, as there's still more battles starting to heat up here. Benjamin Waddle has been constantly fighting since some of the early mistakes with Dakota Dickerson. I don't think this is going to end quite yet. Big mistake coming out of the bus stop there for the 54.
Which may well give the opportunity for Waddle to make this happen. You see the 54 doing everything he can to break the draft, Evan, but it's going to be tight coming out of NASCAR 4.
He's got way too much speed. He'll throw a block to the inside, waddle to the apron, and he'll hold him off enough one last time. What a finish for 13th position as Dakota Dickerson shuts the door on a Benjamin Waddle. And what a final lap, top to bottom here at Daytona. Andrews with the win, the spectacular side-by-side finish between Morad and Eastwood. It is, though, Andrews, Foley, and Morad, the drivers who come home on the podium, as we take a look at your unofficial results today from the virtual Daytona International Speedway for IMSA Esports. Eastwood, Westbrook, they followed each other through the field basically all night, started back in 7th and 8th, come home 4-5, with Richard Height stand all the way down to P6. Milner ends up 7th, John Edwards comes home in 8th, and Kenton Koch sliding all the way to P9 to finish out ahead of Riley Dickerson.
On spot tonight ends up going to Sebastian Priol with Godsacker in 12th spot. Dickerson goes to 13th. Waddles finishes in 14th. Goulet finishes in 15th spot with French, along with Fogier, along with Tyler Cook. Chavez, Albuquerque rounds out the top 20 in this one. Philippi Miller and Long round out the grid, Evan.
Look top to bottom at your full race results tonight. And guys, I don't think we expected that pit stop to be just quite as critical as it was. Of course, we were thinking that maybe it was going to be used for some drivers to get away from some of the groups of cars that we're stuck with all night. But it was basically a 50-50 split through the field between drivers who did decide to take tires and drivers who didn't, James. And that turned to make that second half of the race incredible.
I really enjoyed that pit stop and the way it shook up the race because these drivers were so tight on lap times in the first half of the event. It was maybe 2 or 3 tenths separating about top 10 or 15 cars. And then the pit stop came and you had the decisions from some drivers to take no tires, from some drivers to replace their tires, and that split the lap times dramatically. Those who were on fresh rubber were about a second faster per lap than those on the old rubber. And we saw how that affected the racing in the back end. The last 30 minutes of this, there were drivers falling through the field. There were drivers charging late through the fields, and it gave us some really, really entertaining battles to open up 2021.
And of course, in a little bit of a different way, Justin, getting to check out these LMP2s as well. Quite a show from the virtual Daytona International Speedway. We're now talking with tonight's race winner in this IMSA iRacing Pro Series Preseason Invitational, Scott Andrews, with a masterful performance. Scott, congratulations on the win. It ends up being by a pretty comfortable margin, but just tell us about this race and mainly that pit strategy decision to give up the track position with about 20 minutes left, but to get the tires, which turned out to be the right call.
I suppose it may be a little bit of a risky decision to take tires, given how much time you lose in the pits. But, the track was really hot, really slick, and really difficult to drive. And it was, I was trying to look after my rears as much as I could on that first stint. And just by the end of it, I thought, when I put fuel in this thing, it's going to make it even worse. So I opted to take tires, and I noticed the other guys didn't. But basically, I kind of knew that I was pretty comfortable when I saw the lap time difference on the first 2 laps when they all left the pits together. And from then it was just playing it cool. I actually had to save a little bit of fuel behind them, so I spent a couple.
And of course, driving the LMP2 today at Daytona, just tell us, what was necessary and kind of the strategy to get around this place quickly, of course, with a mix of the, the pros from the IMSA ranks in this race. And of course, with you with a lot of LMP3 experience as well, what it's like getting to race against these guys in a virtual world.
Yeah, it's fun. Actually, everyone was quite well behaved today. So that was good. Turn 1, I think Robbie got a little bit of contact from behind, but other than that, I think it was, I couldn't see back in the pack, but it was pretty clean. A lot of the times when you get these pros on, it's just difficult when you don't have that feeling, so you go into turn 1 barreling in, you want to hit the brakes, but sometimes you don't quite, get the right brake pressure and you can lock up or not brake enough, and then it's very easy to to hit people, and that often happens when you get a lot of the real world drivers on the sim. I've been doing a lot of sim stuff myself. I actually race for Roman Grosjean's esports team, RHG, and that was actually our first win for our new sponsor, Predator Gaming. So I wanted to shout that out, and so that was cool to do that.
It was a good show tonight in this one. Scott, we appreciate you being a part of this. Congratulations on the win.
Yeah, thank you, man. It was a pleasure to be a part of it, and hopefully that pit strategy made it a little bit of interesting for the viewers.
I think definitely so, and hopefully this is a good indication of what's to come for you in 2021. And we'll continue down the podium over to the roommate. Justin Prince is standing by with today's second place finisher, Robbie Foley.
Yes, indeed, Robbie. And how's it feel coming home second today? You're among the drivers who went with the tire strategy.
Yeah, it was great. It was a big debate whether to do it or not. As we saw, the track temp was pretty high in the session, so that makes wear pretty big. In Daytona, you're always really hard on your outside rear tire, the right rear especially. So I think it was the safer call, just knowing that we'd have a really good car to drive at the end. But yeah, it ended up working out pretty well, despite a couple of little issues along the way.
How did the preparation go for you and your fellow teammates over at Turner Motorsport to prepare for this race? I know they were very pumped up on social media, especially with BS Competition jumping aboard too.
Yeah, it was good. Over the last year, I've been working really closely with my teammates at BS, just getting to be a better sim racer. There's a lot of little tricks and some really talented guys on our team that have helped me along. And through this IMSA iRacing Pro Series, I've gotten a little bit more serious with my sim racing. So it's been a lot of fun. It wasn't so much practice. I was actually doing some official racing this week. But yeah, I did a couple of laps, enough to kind of think about the tire strategy. And yeah, I gave it a shot. Hats off to Scott. He did a great job. We're great friends and actually roommates. So we were discussing over the last couple of days what we were going to do in the race, and it worked out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was wondering about that as the race went on. What was kind of like that discussion point to that during the racing itself, saying, can you catch me? Can you catch me?
Yeah, well, it was difficult because in the first stint, I had some damage after getting hit on the start, just barely. And I was noticing I would lose a lot of time on the straights. So it was difficult. In the first stint, I was back to maybe fifth at one point, and then eventually, just as the tires wore, I was very kind to the rear tire, so worked my way back to second. But luckily, we had one fast repair in our pit stop. So after the pit stop, I had all my straight line speed back. So I was lucky to be able to fight to the end. It was interesting with the strategy. I underfueled a little bit, had to save a little bit of fuel, and then had to pass some of the traffic that didn't take tires. But it was a fun race, and hopefully it made for a good show.
Robbie Foley coming home second today. Thank you very much for the time. Evan, very much a pumped up driver on this one.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
It's a great showing for those two as they lead the way first and second in this one. And for the third step on the podium, we'll hand things over to James, who's standing by with the 28.
We are with Daniel Morad, who comes home in third place this afternoon. And Daniel, the big strategy call throughout this race was whether or not to take tires or not take tires. You were in that latter camp. So just take us through the decision-making process and what went into the thinking behind staying out on the old rubber throughout this race.
Well, first off, it's great to be here. Wow, my first virtual podium for the IMSA series. But yeah, no, it was a great race. I didn't really do much running prior to today. Actually, I did zero running. Thank goodness for the fixed setup, guys. Really appreciate that. It helps out the guys that don't have the pro setups, and it kind of levels the playing field. So like back in 2020, mid 2020, when we did the original IMSA virtual series, it was tough because we didn't have access to all the setups, so I had to make my own, and quite a bit different to make a setup on iRacing than it is in real life. There's some nuances that you need to be comfortable with and understand. So yeah, this was great. I love the LMP2 car. It's a great addition in iRacing, and not really something I'm familiar with because I drive GT in real life. But nonetheless, great change, great race, and it was nice to race with guys like Kenton, Richard, Highstand, Scott Andrews. Congrats to him, and Robbie, of course. Awesome drive to catch me. But yeah, the tire strat was definitely the one. I needed the rear tire. I just didn't have anything at the end. It was so hard to get on power on the horseshoes and even onto the banking. And a few times I had the pucker moment, as you'd call them, Code Brown moments, where I had full lock, 180 degrees left and right, but managed to save it.
You managed to save it. We saw a lot of you in your rig throughout the race. And the one thing that I noticed, especially compared to a lot of the other drivers around you, is that it seemed like you were just a little bit more cool, calm, and collected. And that made it easier for you to work those old tires. Even though you weren't on the best rubber, you still were able to maintain the track position. Where did you find that sort of collectedness and that calmness within yourself to make sure that you didn't make a mistake like some of the other drivers around you did?
You know what? I had a great crew. I have to thank Cy Andra, who's a very well-known name in the iRacing community with satellite racing. He's actually an engineer I brought into the real world. So it's just to make a long story short here. I met Cy on iRacing a few years ago, and he was 21 years old, and I'm like, wow, you're a great engineer. And an opportunity came up for him to come and be an intern in one of my teams in real life, and got him that opportunity to transition from iRacing to cars. So he was on the box with me, and another guy named Alex Ellis. He just kind of coached me through on fuel number just to save as much as possible. And we were just trying to hit that fuel number, like a 3.1 or 3.0 liters per lap, just a short fill. And I actually missed my box. So everything I did throughout the stint and like being calm, cool, and collective, having these guys coach me through, everything went away because I missed the box. That was my first time trying a pit entry. Just lack of practice. But in the end, it worked out well, and we made that the no tire strat work just by managing in the early part of the race. It's so important not to overheat the tires on this LMP2 car. So I'd say just having a nice voice in my ear to run me through every lap really helped me and help keep the rear tires under us.
It's a team effort that gets Daniel Moore at a podium finish this afternoon. P3 for you, Daniel. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This afternoon.
Just before I leave here, can I just give a quick shout out to my Twitch chat? I know you guys were kind of alluding to it on stream a little bit, but we had almost 300 viewers, which was epic, and I appreciate every single one of them. What an epic way to finish that for everyone as well. And thanks a lot to all you guys at iRacing and IMSA. Beautiful way to start 2021.
One way to get it going, Evan Pashoka. Really, really solid start to the IMSA iRacing Pro Series.
Exactly. There's no better place to start, as we mentioned earlier, than here at Daytona, even if it is in the virtual world. And, now the countdown is on to the Rolex 24 at Daytona. But at least to put a bow tie on this preseason invitational, we heard it right there from our post-race interviews as we'll bring us back into the picture here. That fixed setup gave everybody really an even playing field. But strategy turned out to be the big difference maker tonight. I think very clearly Scott Andrews at the end of the night, the best car, he wins it. But second on back, who could have guessed, right, how that thing would have played out? And James, I'll go back to you first, I guess, on this one. Just to kind of recap, I thought it was a great race. I think that if every race is like this for this IMSA iRacing Pro Series this year, you're not going to want to miss a single one.
I'll second you on that. Strategy comes into play. Teamwork comes into play. So many of the elements that cross over beautifully between real life and the sim world. It's a testament to the strength of the simulation that iRacing has put together. Then you see all of these pieces combined pretty much the same way that you do in real life. And it takes that same level of thinking in order to get these good finishes. So yes, it might be on a computer, but the challenges I think are just as difficult as we see in the real world, and that maybe more than anything else might be what makes this Pro Series so fun to watch over the course of the campaign, Justin.
Yeah, especially with some of the great battles today, with how intense they were and some bold moves, to say the very least, for some of the drivers. But the strategy definitely was the big indicator for today, for drivers to plan things out and know what could work and what could not work. Have to give credit to Moret to make things work with the no tire strategy and be able to defend his position as he had to hold off several cars and keep up the pace. An impressive race overall, to say the very least.
It's a fun afternoon of racing here at the virtual Daytona International Speedway, and happy that you've been a part of it with us on the iRacing Esports Network. Until then, that's it for us. On behalf of the entire team at IMSA, our crew over at iRacing, and for the broadcast team tonight, for our producer downstairs and everybody else back at iRacing HQ, for Justin Prince, James Pike, and myself, Evan Pasoko, I want to thank you for tuning in and congratulate Scott Andrews, your preseason invitational winner at Daytona. Daytona. Don't forget, Saturday, January 30th, it's the Rolex 24 at Daytona, starting at 3:30 p.m. on NBC. Until next time, we'll see you on the iRacing Esports Network.